Hello friends, we are back with the new lecture on the lecture series of ARDL test. Today in this lecture we are going to learn about ARDL bound test. Till now I have told you how to do the ARDL model, that means what are the various steps for ARDL model. So the first step that we have already learned is to check the stationarity. So to check the stationarity, we are doing just for that whether we have to apply the ARDL model or we have to apply any other model, because each and every model has some criteria. So what we have learned in the previous lectures that for ARDL model there should be one independent and there should be one dependent and many independent variables, and whenever we are going to check the stationary there should be the combination of I0 and I1 for both dependent and independent variables. So that means if we are getting the combination of I1 and I0 at the stationarity, then we are going to apply the ARDL model. And second step, we have learned that how to determine the optimum lag structure. That we have also learned in the previous lectures, that what should be the optimum lag for your dependent variable, what should be the optimum lag for your independent variables, and if you are seeing any variable, that means any lag you have selected that is not insignificant, we are going to remove it. And the next step is we are going to apply the ARDL model. Now once we have applied the ARDL model is just giving us the way that whether whatever variables we have taken, whatever lags we have taken, whether they are significant or not, whether they are impacting our model or not, whether they are creating any effect on the dependent variable or not. But ARDL model is not telling us whether there is a co-integration between the variables that we have taken in our study, whether there is a co-integration or not. So just to check whether there is a co-integration between the variables under the study, we are going to apply the ARDL bond test. Now next step, once we have checked that there is a co-integration between the between the variables with the help of ARDL bond test, the next thing we are going to apply the vector error correction model. And once we have applied the VECM model, the last step is diagnostic check, which is the step in each and every model. Once you are creating the model and then you are going to diagnose it, that whatever variables or whatever model you have created, whether that is a correct model or not. So for that we are going to do the diagnostic check. So today in this video, I'll be talking about the ARDL bond test and the error correction model, vector error correction model. So I'll be talking about these two things, why the ARDL bond test is there and what do you mean by vector error correction model. Now this was the equation that we have learned in the previous lectures, that yt, that means y is your dependent variable, that means today's value of dependent variable is depending on the lag 1, that means previous value of dependent variable, or lag 2 of the dependent variable, lag 3 of the dependent variable, or let's say lag n of dependent variables. So dependent variable is depending on its previous lag, as well as dependent variable is depending on the current value of the independent variable and the previous lag values of the independent variables. So that means what ARDL model is saying, that today's value dependent variable is depending on its own lag or on other variable as well as lag of the other variable. Now this is what ARDL model is saying. So if I'm going to write it in the compact way, it is saying that today's values depending on the lag of dependent variable, that means lag of its own, and lag means previous value. So over here you can say summation of I1 till P and xt minus I, where I will start from 0 to Q. Now, whenever I am taking workshop, normally the students ask why over here I is equals to 1 and why over here I is equals to 0. So the answer is, over here I am saying that dependent variable is depending on its previous lag. So lag means 1 year back or 1 day back or 1 month back, whatever time period you are taking. So that's why I started from 1 over here. But over here I am saying that the dependent variable, today's value dependent variable, is depending on today's value of independent as well as its lag. So I can write as t minus 0 over here. So it can be t minus 0. So that's why I've started from 0 in the case of summation. Now my motive is to check whether there is a co-integration among the two variables or not. As we are already aware, co-integration means co-trending or co-moving, whether both the variables are moving in the same direction or not. And if they are moving in the same direction, whether their trend is also static or not. So now what I am going to do, I am going to see the slope over there. So if I am going to check the slope, so what the equation is, slope of yt will be equals to the same equation, slope of yt minus 1, slope of xt minus 1, and this phi1 and phi2 will be added. And if you are going to see these two things, these will be there if there is a relationship. If there is a co-integration, then you will find the phi term in your equation. So this term will be the ARDL long run terms, and these terms will be your ARDL short run terms. So we have to remember, when there is a co-integration between two variables, that will be in the long run. Co-integration always means relationship that goes hand in hand in a long run. It's not for a short run. So whenever there is a long-term relationship, if we find there is a long-term relationship, we name it as yes, then we say that yes, between these two variables there is co-integration. And now whenever there is a long-term relationship between any two variables, you can say there can be some deviations also. It is not 100% sure that if two lines are moving parallelly, they will not deviate. They can be deviate. There will be some external shocks due to which the lines are deviating. If we are taking two variables, there can be some external shocks due to which one variable, both the variables are moving together, but suddenly one variable is going to deviate. So whenever there is a long run, there will be some deviations and we have to correct that deviation. So these long-term relationship is known as, whenever there is a deviation, we are going to find out error correction term. And this error correction term we are going to name is phi z t minus 1. So if I'll write the same equation, you will see I have written the same equation. The only thing is that I have just replaced this phi yt minus 1 and phi 2 xt minus 1 with phi zt minus 1. So this equation will become my error correction model, and this term is my error correction term. So what I have done, I have only replaced the long run terms with the help of error correction term. Now let's understand with the help of an example. Now for example, let's say that husband and wife have been married for 10 years. That means obvious it's that if husband and wife are married, the two people are married from last 10 years, so there is a relationship. And it is also obvious that they are having a loving and committed relationship, but they sometimes argue, which is obvious in any relationship. Maybe the relationship of a father or a mother, or maybe the relation father or son, or maybe mother or son, maybe husband and wife, maybe brother and sister, maybe two friends. If they are having a long-term relationship, there must be some argue. And if they have a big argument, one of them might try to make things up by doing something nice for the other person. If they are not going to do like this, that means if there is an argument between two people, one has to be silent over there. If both are contradicting each other, the argument will become a fight, and you never know whether the relationship will exist in the future or not. So if the marriage is over here, in my example, marriage is for 10 years, that means there is a long-term relationship. and sometimes there is an argue, that means error is in a relationship. So argue means error is there. And when one person is doing something nice for the other person, that means the one person out of these two people, for husband or wife, they are making some correction in the error. So I can say this would like a error correction term in a error correction model. One person is trying to do something nice for the other. He is going to correct his mistake. So when the one person is trying to correct his mistake, so what he is doing, in this way he is adjusting the relationship to bring it back to the long run equilibrium, so that the husband wife relationship again exists with the love and commitment. Now in my example, long run equilibrium is a state where husband and wife are happy and in love. So they are having a long term relationship, but sometimes there is an argument. So sometimes there can happen that there is a big argument and error comes in it. So error correction term is the husband or wife who makes the correction, and when the relationship deviates from a state. They both are loving, they both are in the love and happy state, but sometimes due to some argument, someone deviate from their love. So it's obvious another one has to make the correction over here. So whenever the deviation is there and whenever there is a long-term relationship, then only the correction will be there. So the speed at which the relationship returns to its long-term equilibrium is determined by the coefficient on the error correction term. Okay, let's say in my example, let's say I'll just give you a small example over here in husband and wife. Let's say a wife is saying that let's say we should make some trip, we should organize some trip, and wife is saying let's move towards the east. We have to explore the east and we will make our trip towards the east direction. But now the husband come into the picture. He says, no, I am going to go for the west direction. So now there is an argument that wife is saying that we will move toward the east. Husband is saying no, we will make a trip towards the west. Now since the argument is there, one has to sacrifice its choice. So now let's say husband is sacrificing his choice and he says, okay, you are right, we are moving towards the east direction only. So now what you are seeing over here, there is a relationship but there is an argument on the trip. So both are deviating. One is saying east, one is saying west. So husband makes the correction. He says, yeah, now we are moving towards the east only. So if they have to keep their relationship in the future, so one has to deviate from it. And over here you will see deviation. His husband is moving in the opposite side. He is moving towards west. Now he is saying towards the east. So it's an opposite, it's a negative direction. So what we learned over here, the error correction term, husband is making the error correction. He is the error correction term. And why is making the error correction term? Because there is a long-term relationship. If he is not having a long-term relationship with his wife, he must have not made the error correction term. So whenever the error correction term is there, it means there is a long-term relationship, or I can say other way around. Whenever there is a long-term relationship, there will be the error correction term. So what we have learned over here, so whenever we in our model, we are finding that the two variables are co-integrating, that means they are having a long-term relationship, then we have to find the error correction term, that in the future if one of the relationship or one of the variable deviates, so what will be the error correction term. Now let's take one more example over here. So now in my example, I'm now taking the example of husband and wife. Let's say a boy and a girl, they are walking in a park and they have an argument. So it does not mean that there is no long-term relationship between them. I have not told you that whether the boy and a girl are husband and wife, whether boy and a girl are cousins, whether they are brother and sister, whether they are boyfriend and girlfriend, or whatever the relationship. So whenever the boy and girl are there, they are having an argument. It does not mean that there is no long-term relationship between them. There can be long-term relationship and there cannot be long-term relationship. Now, it simply means that the relationship is temporarily disturbed. Now, if the boy and girl are committed to each other, that means they are having a long-term relationship, so they will try to resolve the argument and return to the long-run equilibrium. So if they are saying that we have to maintain our long-term relationship, they are brother and sister, they are having a relationship. So what they will do? They will resolve the argument and again return to their long-run relationship of love and affection as a brother and sister are having. So if they are committed, then only they are going to resolve it. Committed means long-term relationship, resolve means error correction term. But however, if the argument is severe and the boy and girl decide to break up, then there is no long-term relationship between them, and if there is no long-term relationship, that means no error correction term will be there. So in this case, there would be no co-integration and no error correction term, because error correction term will there only if there is a co-integration, only if there is a long-term relationship. So the error correction mechanism is a way of adjusting the relationship to bring it back to the long-run equilibrium. If there is no long-run equilibrium, there is no need for error correction mechanism. So in this case of boy and girl who have an argument in a path, there may or may not be an error correction mechanism depending on whether or not they are committed to each other. So that means whether they are having a long-term relationship or not. If they are having long-term relationship, argument will be solved, error correction term will be there. If they don't have a long-term relationship, no error correction term will be there. Okay, jokes apart, now let's come to the example with the help of economics. Now let's say I am having two variables, interest rate and inflation, and these two are having a long-term relationship. Now, if you are having the backup of economics, you will see that there is a monetary and physical policies over there where the government going to adjust it. Now, in monetary policies, central bank often uses the interest rate as a tool to control inflation. Now, if we are seeing that in daily use the inflation is increasing, so what the government do? Government takes the interest rate as a tool to control the inflation. Now, let's see how the government is going to take the interest rate to control the inflation. So, whenever the inflation rate is high, the central bank is going to raise the interest rate, which makes it more expensive to borrow the money. Now let me take one example over here. Let's say a housing loan. I'm just talking about the housing loan. Let's say the rate of the houses in the market is increasing. Now why the rate of the houses in the market are increasing? Because of the demand. People are demanding for more and more houses. People want to buy more and more houses. Now the question arises, why the people wants to buy the house? It's obvious the demand increases because the people are having the money in their pocket. If they are having their money in their pocket, they are having the disposable income, or the other way around, they are seeing that the interest rate are very low. Let's borrow the money from the bank and purchase the house. So it means demand for the houses are increasing. So the inflation rate is also increasing. So now what's the government is doing? Government is saying that the inflation rate is increasing, the rate of the houses are increasing just because the loan is cheap. So government is increasing the rate of the interest. That means if I am going to borrow the house loan, I'm going to take the house loan from the bank, I have to pay more interest on that. Now what will happen if the interest rate will increase? People will borrow less amount from the bank. They will say that if I have to pay this much amount of interest, let's postpone our purchase of our house. We will purchase in the near future, because now the loan becomes expensive. So if the loan is becoming expensive, people are not borrowing the money. So that means people are having less disposable income in their hands. And if they are having less disposable income in their hand, they are not going to demand for the houses. If they are not going to demand for the houses, that means the rate of the houses will decrease. If the rate of the houses is decreasing, that means inflation rate is going down. So what the government do? Government uses interest rate as a tool to control the inflation. So these two variables are moving, they are co-integrating, they are having a long-term relationship, but suddenly some external shock. External shock means the people are having more disposable income in their hands, so they demand for more houses. They are ready to pay more money to purchase the house. So inflation increases, the demand for the houses increases, price of the house increases, inflation increases. So inflation deviates from the rate, whatever the rate it was running. Now the government came into the picture, they changed the interest rate also. If inflation is increasing, government has also increased the interest rate. So what will happen? Inflation will go down and interest, and again the government will decrease the inflation rate. So with the help of this interest rate, the government has reduced the aggregate demand in the economy, which in turn helps to lower the inflation. So now you have seen that in my example over here, interest rate and inflation are having the long-term relationship. So deviations are there. And deviations are there, so error correction term is there. Government has taken the error correction term for the interest rate to increase the interest rate. So error correction term, error correction model is created. So ECM will include a term that measures the deviation from the long run equilibrium. Government has seen that how much inflation has deviated. So let's change the interest rate also. So error correction term captures the extent to which interest rate and inflation are adjusting to their long run equilibrium. If the error term is negative, as I told you in the example of husband and wife, husband has moving to the opposite direction, so it is a negative direction. So whenever you are seeing that error correction term is negative, then it means that when interest rate and inflation deviates from long run equilibrium, they tends to return to the equilibrium over that time. Whether the interest rate is deviating or whether the inflation is deviating, other has to deviate it. So the speed at which they return to the equilibrium is determined by the coefficient of error correction term that we are going to learn in my next lecture, how we are going to calculate the ECT, how we are going to calculate the error correction model, and how we are going to see whether there is a long-term relationship or not. That means whether the two variables are co-integrating among themselves or not. Hope you have understand the concept of co-integration with these three simple examples. So let's meet again in the next lecture. With the help of R, I am going to do how these two variables are co-integrated between each other and what are the various steps whether to see my model is correct or not, and how the diagnostics is done for the model. Thank you.